from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here on a Friday night. We're done with the sober podcast. We're back drinking here. We've got some Bullet Bourbon, Frontier whiskey. I think it's my favorite these days. It's definitely my go-to. It's 420. The Barstool office smells like a fucking grow house right now. There's people toking up all over the place. I have not indulged yet today because I'm very excited for this conversation. We have somebody from Blockstack in the studio. I'd like to introduce you all to Patrick Stanley, the growth partner at Blockstack. Patrick, welcome to the pod.
Hey, how's it going? And thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
I'm really interested. I had to interrupt the conversation we were having before we started recording because you were giving out too much good information that I didn't want to miss here on the podcast. And I know your time is limited. You got a boxing match to get to tonight. So let's jump right into it. This is Tales from the Crypt. How did you find Bitcoin?
So actually, I was living in Chicago at the time, and I think I was in my early 20s. I think I was like 22. I think every young man at some point starts to dive down the rabbit hole of, what is money?
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of going down this rabbit hole, learning the sort of Austrian side of economics. I'm not even sure where I first heard about it, but I remember being incredibly skeptical. And then the more I looked into it, the more I became very optimistic on it. And I remember my brother was a commodity trader in Chicago, and I was telling him about it. And this is when Bitcoin was at, I think it was about $90 at the time.
It's like 2012, 2011 maybe?
Yeah. And he's kind of like a prodigy trader. I mean, he's very good. And he just decided to, buy like $50,000 worth of it.
Boss.
And he held on to it. And actually, it came in handy for him. And I think there was like a time when he was in like a little bit of a pickle, and the Bitcoin actually saved him.
Really?
Yeah. So
what part of Chicago were you living in?
I was living in Old Town.
Old Town?
Yeah.
All right. I went to DePaul University, so I discovered Bitcoin in Chicago around the same time.
Oh,
That's
cool.
a very interesting story. I was slumming it in Lakeview, but that's sort of where I fell down the rabbit hole. I was working at a managed futures fund, not too much different than what your brother was doing, but I was the crazy analyst in the office screaming, "We should be focusing on Bitcoin. We should be buying this." I got laughed out of the office, but my old coworkers hit me up and are asking for advice, so I think they've turned a leaf.
Oh man, I think like there's probably so many listeners right now that were like that Bitcoin person for so many years and made fun of for so many years. Shout out to everyone that was that Bitcoin person.
Shout out to the Chads out there that grew some tough skin. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy getting ridiculed. It was something that is very taboo. I would say it's still taboo to an extent, but
yeah, I think like honestly, the time it takes to get people up to speed on what Bitcoin is and how valuable it was just was too long. And I started adopting like the kind of like I'm a crazy person, like Kanye style, kind of approach of explaining Bitcoin, just to keep it short. And I think probably confused a lot of people in the process.
Yeah. Oh my God, I confused a lot of the people in my office because that was during like the alt run of 2014 where people were like going crazy, and I had like. I said people laughed at me. There was a couple that like sort of got it and dove in with me, and we all got wrecked in the altcoin explosion of 2014, 2015.
Yeah. Are you interested in any coins outside of Bitcoin?
Monero.
Yeah.
The privacy coins, because I think fungibility is very important from a monetary perspective. So I like to see projects that really put that on the pedestal and work towards that. So I like Monero. There's just too much to focus on in Bitcoin, I think, to sort of like to go out there and maybe I've got my head in the sand, not focusing on it, other things. But I tend to stick. I would consider myself a maximalist to an extent. I am a maximalist. I'm going to come out and say it. I'm loud and proud now. I've been very tepid about it, but I'm a maximalist, I would say.
What makes you a maximalist? I see I see this on Twitter, like self-proclaimed maximalist, and I kind of treat this like politics. I don't really go into kind of what my favorite things are or what I'm holding or whatever. But I find funny parallels. I find funny parallels in Bitcoin maximalism, and you hear a lot of kind of people who are self-proclaimed carnivores, and it's almost like it's kind of similar in my mind. It's kind of similar to like the Epicureans, like they were like a vegetarian cult, and that's the way you found out about sort of like Pythagorean's theorem.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I say Epicureans?
You did say Epicureans, yeah. Pythagorean's cult.
Yeah. And I wonder if there is a parallel here, like the like the people who are eating meat and
I definitely think there is. I'm not a carnivore by any means. I'm an omnivore. I'll eat whatever you put in front of me. Garbage disposal, if you will.
So what makes you a maximalist? Sorry.
Again, we're dealing with software here, and I've explained this a couple times on the podcast, but we're dealing with software here, and these protocols are securing value. They're securing money. Money is very important, and that security should be paramount to every project. And I just think Bitcoin is the only project to date that does what it markets that it will do, which is enable peer-to-peer censorship resistant distributed transactions or transactions in a distributed network. It's worked as marketed since January 3rd, 2009, the day it was launched, and has produced blocks roughly every 10 minutes. There was maybe one or two slip-ups where like the 82 million block reward or whatever that was, but that was quickly resolved. And I just believe that the conservative approach of Bitcoin in particular is the wisest approach, and it will win out in the long run, because as soon as you bastardize the security of a network, which I would argue happened with the DAO hack and the Solidity hacks that have been going on in Ethereum in particular, I think that's paramount. And on top of that, like, you get into things like hash power. This is a zero-sum game for energy. There's only so much energy until we get Dyson spheres in space, or we can mine asteroids, or we find a renewable energy that's easily what's the word I'm looking for? Stored and then transferable as well. So I think blockchains are a zero-sum game to an extent, and I think Bitcoin's combination of the Lindy effect, the conservative approach to development, the hash rate that's going on right now, it's up to like 33 exahash a second, which is a crazy, insane, secure network. I don't think anybody or any other project in the space is even close when it comes to hash rate and security. Yep. And then, again, the talent of the developers working on the protocol, like the hardcore cypherpunks that built the technologies that sort of led to Bitcoin. Yeah. Just using that as a heuristic, sort of the people that built the foundations for these things, believe this is the penultimate example of a sound money in the digital age. What are your thoughts?
I agree on the security aspect. I mean, I think Bitcoin has some pretty valuable properties, and I think when used right can unleash a lot of creativity and innovation. And I can see Bitcoin as being this sort of like prime mover, this big gear that turns a lot of other gears, in the sense that because you can rely on it and you don't have to rely on something that can be changed or is sort of high entropy, I think it provides something that a lot of creativity can come from in the form of layer 2 protocols, decentralized applications, etc. It's actually one of the things that drew me to Blockstack. And while I have an appreciation for Ethereum, like, I think the community is like vibrant. I think Ethereum is very cool, and I think there's a lot of innovation happening there. And more and more, every day and week and year. I do like, what attracted me to Blockstack was they made a very important design decision, and that was to rely on a blockchain that is the most secure, for putting names in there and pushing all logic to the edges.
Mm-hmm.
And Bitcoin serves the purpose very, very well there. It's the sort of most reliable blockchain at the moment. If Bitcoin ever dies, Blockstack could move on to another blockchain.
Yeah, you're blockchain agnostic, right?
Exactly.
And that's a good segue. Let's talk about the sort of stop saying sort of, Marty. The founding of Blockstack, like Manib and Ryan, they worked on Namecoin, and I love that you brought up like the security of the chain, because they found that so Namecoin was one of the first altcoins, right? It was like one of the first 5, I'm pretty sure, right? Am I correct in saying that?
I think it was the
Yeah, it might have been the first. It might have been the first. It was like them or Purecoin or something like that.
I think it was the first.
Yeah. And so Ryan in particular was working on that, right?
I'm not sure who was working on it. I started working at Blockstack a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
but the founding story, I've heard secondhand only a few times. They were working on creating a decentralized naming system with one name. What they found was that the security of the network wasn't very good, and what was happening is there was like a 51% attack possibility for an extended period of time, and
this was on Namecoin, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like they learned a lesson very early on, and decided to create a virtual chain that could live on top of Bitcoin, and put hashed zone files, which are essentially kind of like little address cards that you can put information in that are similar to that is used in DNS, and into the Bitcoin blockchain. And the virtual chain is able to look over that record and kind of spin up a cohesive kind of phone book of who's who, and rely on it, because you can rely on the security of the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah, and that's what fascinates me about Blockstack is, number one, your focus on the edge cases is moving all the logic to the edge, right?
Yeah.
It's like, don't mess with the protocol level. This is one thing I was preaching. Actually,
It's called the end-to-end design principle.
Okay.
The end-to-end principle.
Yeah, and this is one thing I saw. Somebody invited me to give a guest lecture at Baruch College. I always butcher the pronunciation of that college, Baruch, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Baruch College. And so I was talking about this a lot today. So I did this morning, and talking about how I think Bitcoin should be slow and dumb at the protocol level. It should just enable peer-to-peer censorship resistant distributed transactions and be extremely secure. And then you move everything to second layers like the Lightning Network and Blockstack.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about how Blockstack works as a second layer. Like what? So you guys have a browser that lives on my server, correct?
Your browser is running locally on your own computer.
Yes, my computer. And then so I have a bunch of Blockstack IDs.
Oh, nice. Which ones do you have?
I have quite a few.
Oh, you're hoarding Blockstack IDs.
I'm hoarding Blockstack IDs.
What's your favorite one?
Amazon.
You have Amazon.id?
Yeah.
Wow. I looked up Twitter.id today. Someone to take an Khloe Kardashian.id is available though. Yeah.
We should tell Lewis downstairs. I don't know if I want. Do I want people to know I have Amazon? I actually went for 2-letter names, so I have like MDRD.
Oh, nice.
Marty.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Nice. Well, what's like, how like at a high level, how Blockstack works is it provides you with your own identity that's rooted in the blockchain, and it gives you a human readable name that you can use inter-app. It also provides you with a wallet, so you can send Bitcoin, and soon you'll be able to send stacks, the native app token of Blockstack. And then it also provides you with a nice kind of API for access to your own personal data storage. So yeah.
Don't want to cut you off there, but let's dive into that. Like personal data storage is a hot topic in the news. We had somebody on last week talking about the data problems at Facebook and Google. So this is probably the main topic that we should dive in here is Blockstack's whole ethos is basically we're giving your data to you and you control it, as opposed to having your data sit on Google and Facebook servers. And this is something revolutionary. And you guys are really building the decentralized internet that they're trying to build on Silicon Valley. Correct?
Yeah.
And you were telling me before the show you're actually advising them?
Yep. Yeah, we're advising them. Yeah, the personal data storage thing, I think, is, at the end of the day, it's giving people back the right to, effectively own their data and their information and their identities and their money on the internet. And if you think about, what do you own on the internet today? Most people would. It's actually funny. Like most people were surprised when they answer that question because they never thought about it. It's like that. It's like the kind of like what makes money valuable question.
Right.
Like you got to dive down the rabbit hole there for a second. And I think what's interesting here is like, we kind of just taking a step back. We created this internet thing fairly quickly. We've benefited from it dramatically. I think we would all agree that the internet has been a net positive for humanity.
Agreed.
Yeah, but I think when it was first created, this like Web 1.0 kind of vision was that people would be very creative on the internet. They'd be able to, create pages and not just bookmarks, and they'd be able to innovate very, very, very fast. But in practice, really like that wasn't happening. Like unless you were like a hardcore, kind of developer, you weren't really creating. And so people were just kind of observers on the internet, just kind of watching it form. And then Web 2.0 came along, which was like, in our eyes, it's effectively these like social networks that allow for creativity, but within walled gardens.
Yeah.
So you can post a picture, you can post a blog, you can share videos, but you don't get to own it. And as a byproduct of you not owning it, and the sort of these monolithic large companies owning it, they also control how the developers can innovate with that data. And so, we've kind of like drank this sweet poison because it gave us this awesome ability to create. But we've locked ourselves into a local maxima, I would say. And what the promise of Web 3 is, all the creativity of Web 2.0 without the walled gardens. It's this chance to take back ownership, take back identity, start from scratch, and allow for true innovation, like unbridled innovation to happen. Like in my feeling is that there is going to be a Cambrian explosion of innovation once top talent developers start finding out about this. And I think things like Blockstack will really sort of usher that in.
Yeah, because you guys have. I mean, people like to talk about dApps on Ethereum, but you guys have dApps to market already. Like my podcast is on the .podcast app.
Yeah.
In the Blockstack browser. Like,
yeah. We've been like so.
You guys have Coin. You have portfolio trackers. You have Google Docs, but you have like, excuse me, like a Google Docs competitor. You guys have working dApps. Am I wrong with that assumption, or?
We have working dApps, and more importantly, they're scalable to millions and billions of people.
Right.
That's incredibly important. So like when I came to Blockstack in January of last year, it was like 4 people working at Blockstack, and it was like a team of PhDs in distributed systems from Princeton, and they just had their heads down working very quietly for like 3 years. And I mean, that's all changing now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think people are going to hear more and more about Blockstack, especially as like, you know, you see this sort of like, I think you're going to see this surprise kind of come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I'm seeing starting to happen. And I'd also say like, the apps that exist on Blockstack today are only made possible as recently, like the kind of apps in which you share information with other people was only made possible as recently as February of this year.
Oh.
So, like, here are some apps that exist on Blockstack that are undiscovered, and some that are, you know, in stealth mode. So we have Dot Podcast, that's uncensorable podcasting network. We have a community development app that we actually just launched this Wednesday, that we've been giving out Stacks tokens for community contributions. You sign in with your Blockstack ID, you earn Stacks tokens, and then you know, later you can cash out. We have a fully decentralized Google suite. You know, it's like Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, and that also has a communication app in it as well. None of this relies on any centralized servers.
So let's talk about how huge this is. Like, Google has access to all of your information in your Google Docs, technically.
Yeah, not in Graphite, they don't.
No.
And so there's a huge Wired piece that came out on Graphite. The author of the piece, Tom Simonite, wrote the whole piece in Graphite.
Really?
Yeah, and like you can share it with his editor through Graphite. You know, we have tons of apps that are gonna like catch people. Like, people are gonna not be expecting them. We have a fully decentralized Twitter that's being created right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've been playing around with that.
How's that looking?
So it's being developed by.
It's a Princeton kid, right?
Yeah, and like this. So apparently this kid is like the best CS student that Princeton has ever had.
No. What?
That's what the professors are saying.
Really?
Yeah. That said, you know, they're a young team. They're building a decentralized and uncensorable Twitter. And the interesting thing too here that I think like people have a hard time like sort of grokking is it doesn't require any money to post a tweet because you own all your tweets, and people will literally everyone owns their own tweets, and your feed is made up of all the tweets that people own and that you follow. So like by comparison, like I think a lot of the lenses that people look through when they think about decentralized apps is like, okay, this app has to touch the blockchain at every point.
Hey,
it's like
you need to fund your tweet with gas or something like that. It's like,
yeah, and like that might lead to other innovations, but my sense is that low friction is actually better when it comes to doing things that you do on the toilet and then leave. You know, not to speak ill of any apps that are pay to post. I think, you know, maybe there are some business models that come out of that, or something that's positive. But I think when it comes to preserving freedom of speech, when it comes to low friction, low payments, this decentralized sort of version of Twitter, I think is going to be very, very interesting. I think almost like the social ramifications that come out of that are going to be interesting too. Like I don't even know if I'm prepared for that. You know, like anyone can post anything and you can't take it down.
You can't kick Weave off of the decentralized Twitter.
What's Weave?
Weave. He was the hacker who got, I forget who he hacked, but he got sent to prison. I don't know if he was radicalized in prison, but he came out. He's on Twitter. He's like a terrible anti-Semite, like white supremacist.
That's the worst place to become radicalized.
Yeah. I don't know if it happened in prison or like his time in prison just hardened him, but yeah, like he's somebody who's been kicked off Twitter, like the alt-right.
You know, okay, so this is like I think a very interesting thing, and this is something that I think is worth talking about. You know, the people who are being censored on platforms are not always Nazis. Sometimes they're sex workers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're political dissidents. And the reason I'm so excited about the decentralized Twitter and all this decentralized social networking, blogging, et cetera, is we're no longer trusting a company to preserve a record of human consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to look back on today with Twitter and just think this was the craziest thing to trust a company with collective, human consciousness.
Right.
And I think it's worth getting steps on soapbox. I think it's worth preserving this for our grandchildren and generations to come, because whether you agree with something like a Trump or not, I think it's important for us to be able to study how things like that happen. And if that information's not available or it's censored or you're not getting a true ordered view of that, you're not going to be able to make sense of reality. And I think understanding ourselves is a very is a worthwhile kind of pursuit.
I would 100% agree, and that's something that scares people. It was like things on Twitter, like people are like, Twitter's too toxic. Bitcoin in particular, crypto Twitter in particular.
Manib had a tweet that had some replies, and then it said at the bottom of all the replies, it said, show more tweets. These are like the censored ones. And 2 of the tweets said, fuck. And then 1 tweet said, punch.
Right?
And I'm thinking, who do you have to be that triggered by that speech? But on the flip side of the coin is, what do I not know that led to that decision to hide that?
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, users should be able to opt into that experience.
That vitriol if they want to. Yeah. It's like, that's the thing I tell people about Twitter. Like, Twitter is too confusing. It's like, it's one thing Twitter could do better is teach people how to use Twitter. So if you're not using TweetDeck and creating lists and sort of filtering the information flows that you're getting on the app, I don't think you're using Twitter correctly. Like, you can mute people, you can block people, you can really filter out keywords. You just got to learn how to build up your sort of curation tool. That's what Twitter is. I would argue that outside of the censorship, Twitter is the best communication tool ever created. It's why we're sitting here today.
I mean, it's really nuts. Like, I'm sure probably the majority of the listeners have, thought about what it would be like to live in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and think about something like Twitter existing. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
Right.
To say that you can broadcast something to everyone in the world, should they care to listen to it, is mind-blowing.
And it's created this sort of thought meritocracy where an individual can rise to the top if their thoughts are good.
It's funny. I heard this somewhere. Twitter is a place where you gather around thoughts and then meet in person afterwards, and Facebook is a place where you meet in person and then gather around a social network. And I think I owe a lot of where I am today to Twitter and being able to network with people so easily and so quickly, because it really is a meritocracy. I remember on the last podcast you had with Santi in, I think it was November 6th or something around there, he said, he was like, it was the craziest thing. I was able to ask who is the evolutionary? It was evolutionary biologist.
It was Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
If he's ever tried LSD or psychedelics, and I just thought this was so amazing. And so he asked Richard Dawkins if he had ever tried psychedelics. Richard Dawkins said, "No, but I've been speaking to I think a woman who about this, and I'll get back. Maybe I'll get back to you," or something like that. I forget what he actually said. I remember listening after that podcast, and I got to check in on that and see if he got back, and he didn't. So I asked, "Did you try out psychedelics?" And maybe he'll respond. And I think that's it's fascinating. You can collar someone and just pull them down to your level, right? But also that someone who's trying to learn can about something that maybe can ping you. It's like a complete level playing field.
And if you approach these people that you're trying to get information from in the correct way, I've found that most people are like willing to interact with you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's old videos of Steve Jobs describing how he used to go through the phone book when he was 12 years old and call up Hewlett and Packard because they live in Palo Alto. Mm-hmm. And he was like, most people just have a hard time, getting up the courage to just ask for something, because usually people will just do it. And I think that pertains mostly to just like, asking a question. But regardless, like Twitter proves that out on a daily basis. I
would not be sitting in the seat right now without Twitter. I would not be where I am without Twitter. I owe a lot to the app you built, Jack. I met Lewis, the dude who convinced me to run this podcast, via Twitter. Mm-hmm. DMs. I met every single guest. I just ran through that in my head. Every single guest that has been on this podcast has initiated a relationship via DMs,
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
And the cool thing about Twitter too is it shows sort of your meritocracy. I think obviously it's not like directly correlative to the value you're adding, but let's say this podcast gets really popular. Well, Marty's got 5,000 followers. In 6 months, Marty's got 10,000 followers. You're able to get better guests. It's like it's actually a good case for why there should be a decentralized Twitter. For example, if you're a marketer, you should have a right to own your email list and own your followers, and to even like charge for protected tweets and things like that. I'm now just thinking through the decentralized lens. Like, what Twitter doesn't allow you to do is probably something that is worth exploring for app developers that are building decentralized apps. The uncensorability is one thing. The kind of Patreon-like subscription models is another thing. It's crazy. Like this company is only worth $8-10 billion or something like that, but has an outsized impact on society, yet is not capturing all of it. And what that tells me is that it's actually not providing enough value for its users, and that those users should be capturing the value instead. I mean, I'm a little anarchist to Twitter in a sense, but also appreciative of it.
That's it. I would actually say it seems like Jack's like going through like a bit of a transition right now. Like he's very like with Cash App in particular, like he's very pro Bitcoin, very bullish on the space,
which is very interesting because like I look at Jack as, I mean, I absolutely respect the guy as a founder. But I do look at him as a bit. I don't want to say maybe virtue signally. Like just to like call it like it is.
Yeah. I would agree.
I think
he caves easily under enough pressure.
Yeah, he does cave easily, and I think that can be a feature for some and a bug for others. And it doesn't affect me.
That's one thing
directly, but it probably affects some other people who get banned. It probably elevates some people who shouldn't be elevated.
I'm curious to see what goes on behind back doors. I think he's got pressure from some powerful people.
You think so?
I mean, if you're a government, Twitter is probably the most disruptive tool, like, in the world. And I'm sure
maybe Facebook, it's like we're on Twitter, so we think that, but I think Facebook might be one, as well, and then Twitter second. If Twitter had as many users as Facebook, I think it'd be no question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another interesting thing, like the quality of.
But Jack did make that. He's taken a stance on Bitcoin, which and I think it's very interesting because his stance on cryptocurrencies does not. I don't want to say doesn't align with his sort of social stance, or maybe he's just a very complex individual. Mm-hmm. But I typically maybe unjustifiably categorize Bitcoiners as fairly libertarian or conservative, mm-hmm. and I think other sort of like other cryptocurrency branches as either derivations of that or just maybe maybe more liberal or more like socially conscious. I think there is actually a political division as well as a crypto division. I think that exists.
Oh, it definitely exists, and you see the different types of politics congregating around different chains. Like I would argue, like Ethereum's got more of a Keynesian, I would also say socialist mindset to an extent. Very virtue signally in my mind.
Yeah, no,
and then Bitcoin hardcore conservatives, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say absolutely in the sense that that from a quick glance, I mean, I will say I think there are probably a lot of libertarians in Ethereum. And there's different lenses in which you can look at Ethereum, and there's different trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
You can take on Ethereum, but I think that's kind of fair to say.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's interesting. I mean, this is a huge psychological experiment almost. You see who's gravitated to what, who gravitates to what.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day,
it's Ethereum is very community minded.
Very, very, very. But
I say the community is the strongest aspect of Ethereum. Like I think its biggest feature is its community.
Yes.
And I think Bitcoin's biggest feature is its security and immutability.
Yes, and I would argue that you should value security and immutability above all else. Community should be way down the line because these technologies exist to let people that hate each other utilize them in the same fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter
that's the important point.
Exactly. So it's not, hey, let's all buddy kumbaya, get together and bring each other up from our bootstraps. This is a technology to enable anybody, no matter your religious creed, your socioeconomic status, your political beliefs. Bitcoin was created just so anybody could utilize it. It doesn't. That's the thing people don't realize is like these blockchains, it's code, software running on hardware. Like it doesn't understand the politics happening outside of it. Like it produces blocks at a set pace and runs the rules that are dictated by the software, and it has Bitcoin has no idea about the debates that go on outside of the protocol.
Yeah. Everything you just said is why we keep having Nick Szabo come to our conferences.
Let's jump into Szabo. I love that man. I was pumping Szabo a lot this morning when I was giving that lecture.
Szabo is a very nice individual. It was really funny. We had the Blockstack summit in Mountain View in July of 2017, and it was like Coachella for crypto. It was awesome. It was like one of the best days of my life. And then the Berlin event was like one of the other best days of my life. Shout out to Shannon Voigt, who put on both those events. Don't try to steal her. She's the best conference person in the game.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She used to run like massive day, like multi-day events at Food and Wine magazine.
Oh wow.
She's like an artist with it.
Crushes it.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's a one-woman team. She has no other team.
Really?
Like that's the most mind-boggling thing. So we've had Szabo at both of those. At the first conference, Szabo was about to go up to speak, and he's a man of very few words. He'll just say, "Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so I need this. Okay, good." And he just like goes. He's very much in his own head. He just kind of like stands up there and just like and just kind of it just kind of comes out of him, But before he went on stage, he was like, "Oh, can you hold this?" And he like handed me his wallet and his phone and his keys. And I was like, maybe this isn't Satoshi Nakamoto. So
yeah, for all you freaks out there, a lot of people think Nick is Satoshi or part of the group that is Satoshi.
Why do you call them freaks?
I don't know. It's just like something so I write a daily newsletter too, and then
nice. Marty's bent,
and it's something that. So what I try to do with this podcast and the newsletter is basically create an olive branch between the uber technical side of Bitcoin and blockchains and the masses that want to learn more. Like people are like, holy shit, like maybe I should know more about this. And I try to teach people with by not taking myself too seriously.
And you do a great job.
Joking around with people.
You do a great job. I mean, I've been listening to your podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know where to sit back and kind of let someone go in, you know, and you also know when to change up the topic.
Yeah. I don't want to change up the topic here though. Let's stick on Szabo.
Szabo, yeah.
Actually, no. Let's not stick on Szabo.
He likes being elusive. I'll tell you that.
I would love to get him on this podcast. So, Nick, if you're listening,
he's not listening.
The invite's
Stop
open.
it. Just kidding.
He's definitely not listening.
No, he might be listening.
I have conversation with one-sided conversations with Vitalik, like once every third episode on this podcast.
Do you?
Yeah, Vitalik. I know you're listening. You can come on too.
Yeah. I can intro you to Nick. He likes his privacy. That's for sure. I mean, like, it's crazy. Like, we'll get him at these conferences, and he's like, "Yeah, just don't publish the video." I'm like, "Really? Don't publish the video?" All right.
All right. Fine. Sounds like he won't want to come on this. Then.
Yeah. Fine. But you know, it's good having him there. I mean, like, he's kind of like the OG. That's like, like, you know, Bernie Sanders, like, they say that he's like the old grandpa. That's like, you know, warning about like, you know, like an asteroid coming to hit the Earth. Like Nick Szabo is kind of, not a grandpa, but he's kind of like an OG that has thought through the stuff for many, many decades. And you know, he knows what he's talking about.
So he's got.
Also, what does he do?
He teaches at George Mason, doesn't he? Is that it? Or was he at one point?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm pretty sure at one point he was teaching at George Mason. Could be wrong. But he's somebody who, like, really knows his shit. Like, he's got a law degree, a computer science degree, like a cryptography master. Like, if anybody, like I say many times on this podcast, there's no experts in the Bitcoin space. Like, if there is somebody that's close to an expert, it's Nick Szabo.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, he wrote the paper describing smart contracts.
Yeah.
He and then the God Protocols paper he wrote too was another incredible
That's
one.
a mind-blowing one.
Right? So if you freaks out there have not read any of Nick's work yet, like, go on the Nakamoto Institute, their literature page, I believe, or their research page has all of Nick's white papers and technical writings and blog posts from the past. And then check out his blog, unenumerated. It's just unenumerated.blog.com?
Yeah.
Or .org?
I think it's I can look it up.
We'll find it.
Yeah. No, I think it's worth giving him the
but definitely, like, read his stuff. Like, shelling out the history of money.
Unenumerated.blogspot.com.
Unenumerated.blogspot.com.
Can you imagine how many times I say the word Blockstack per day? Unenumerated.blogspot.com.
There was this is actually a funny story about Blockstack IDs. I was trying to get Overstock, but in haste, I wrote Overstack, and I was like, "Fuck!" So I bought, like, an ID that I didn't think would be valuable, and then and I was like, Overstack. I was like, "This is on Blockstack. Like, maybe somebody comes up with an Overstack block one day."
I'll tell you what, we have hundreds of kind of like apps that people did in a weekend, and they all name them block something or stack something. Everything's block party, block tweet, block X, block, you know, block. Yeah. It's like, okay, so the word block actually shouldn't be used in every single. It's like there's no naming creativity in this space, which actually tells me that there needs to be a lot more. We need to bring in real designers. We need to bring in real engineers into the space, and I think it's such early days that sometimes I think the first go at some projects where really great designers or really great engineers kind of attack the blockchain, kind of like sort of approach the blockchain thing, is their first attempt, and I think on the second attempt or third attempt, they'll get it right, and we'll start seeing some applications that are just like absolutely mind-blowing. And like what I get excited about is, especially just bringing this back to Blockstack, it's part of what I know, is like because the users own their own data, they can swap apps and not be locked in like at all. So like imagine using like a notes-taking app, like Evernote, and you want to use another app that's much better, but uses all that same data. Like today, you'd have to like take it out. There's this like huge, very frictionful process.
Yeah.
In the Blockstack world, you'd literally just press login to the other app, and it'd be as if you've been using it the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I think like my sort of vision for what it's like, people don't know what they're missing out on yet, and I think it's still early days. So like it's a little tough. You got to squint a little bit, but like I think we're going to have like a much more seamless, magical sort of internet experience because we're going to take back ownership.
Yeah, so let's dive into that push versus pull. So Blockstack's a very push-oriented sort of data structure, and then whereas pull is what Facebook and Google are. They're pulling our data from their servers and presenting it to us, where Blockstack, which is the beauty of it and sort of the whole mentality behind the decentralized internet, is that you hold your data and you push it out when necessary. So like how much data control are we going to get because of these technologies?
No, I mean like you can have terabytes of data that never see the light of day. And so you'd have control over that data, of course. That's on one end of the spectrum. That's like single player apps, we'll call those. Similar to like single player games, where like Solitaire doesn't need to run on a server. It can just like run on any device.
Yeah, it's just logic, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the world of multiplayer, you're now sharing data with other people. Obviously, those people can like screenshot data, but what we're getting at here is something that's more like how the real world works. Like if I show you a picture of me and my girlfriend on my phone,
beautiful girlfriend,
no one can see that but you and me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to ask Facebook. I didn't ask any third party. And with Blockstack, you're able to do that and know that the person on the other end is who they say they are. I think that's...
And you can prove it on the blockchain.
Exactly. And people are doing it today.
I'm doing it.
Yeah. He's doing it.
And how long do you think this takes? Like what are you guys talking about at Blockstack? Like how long do you think before like Blockstack gets like a considerable user base?
Like I'm just going on.
Do you think there needs to be like an event that triggers like wakes people up and says, "Holy shit, we can't use decentralized apps anymore"?
Well, if you think about it from like, just think about this from an application perspective. If you get 100 million users, who whatever that is built on is the winner. For all intents and purposes.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a breakout. In order for a breakout winner to exist, there needs to be scalability. There also needs to be sort of features that weren't previously accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those are really important. And, how much time it's going to take before we have a breakout app, I don't know. But my gut is that as we get better and better at exposing new developers to the tools to create scalable, global applications that don't require third-party servers, that allow for a better user experience than what people are used to today, like I think that last part is very important. I could see something happening this year that catches everyone off guard. Let's put it that way.
Okay. I like that.
I love being able to say with confidence that even if an application was successful beyond our wildest dreams, the network wouldn't hold it back.
Right? You don't have a CryptoKitties situation.
Exactly.
Which, yeah, and that's beautiful. And that's why I've been drawn to, like, just to let you know, I've been a fan of Blockstack and Ryan and Manib for years. Like, I remember them at Namecoin. I think I went to the first ever Blockstack meetup in New York where, I know we got like 10 minutes?
15.
Okay, cool. And I there's something like, like you said, like they're very head down, like get shit done type
Yeah.
mentality, and that's what I respect the shit.
Mm-hmm.
I respect the shit out of Manib and Ryan for those reasons.
Yeah.
They've just been very quiet, head down, building this out and actually bringing something to market that's scalable. And then the whole pushing everything to the edge where
Mhm.
you don't interact with the protocol just
I mean-
logically makes sense to me.
I mean,
And
we're using the same principles that the people who created the internet and World Wide Web used.
Yeah.
And we're patching the, so like the, I'll probably butcher this, but the end-to-end principle is, I believe David Clark, early pioneers of the 80s and the internet, and was essentially like you want to push all the logic and all of the complexity to the edges of a system, of a distributed system in the case of like the internet. And when you put all logic in the center, like you get sort of log jams, and like Ryan and Manib, their backgrounds inform them of this ahead of time, so they were able to build something. And I spotted that from afar because I was having my reservations of about Ethereum as like really the go-to like next thing like at the time.
they have really great marketing, incredible marketing.
They have really great marketing, and also I think like I have a lot. Listen, I have a lot of respect for Ethereum, and I think there'll be I don't think it'll be winner take all. By the way, like I really don't feel any competition with them. I live outside of a world of zero sum with Ethereum or EOS or anything else. I really think that I'm kind of just focused on Blockstack and like.
Well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, and I'm not going to speak for you. I'll speak for myself, but I think you guys are attacking this from a design perspective, from a system design perspective, in a much wiser way than Ethereum and everybody else trying to do everything on chain.
This year, applications will be able to create tokens. Later this year, applications will be able to use smart contracts. When an application hits, the platform that's going to allow for it to be successful is one that's going to allow it to scale. Maybe it has its own token. Maybe it needs its own blockchain. Blockstack will allow you to actually create your own blockchain that has all the security benefits of Bitcoin.
Really? How do you guarantee that?
Well, you'd have to, so...
Why not just use Bitcoin at that point? Like, could you use it via the Lightning Network? Like, use, like, maybe create, like, a dApp on... Okay, yeah.
So this is something that's in development, but there's a very clear path, and we'll make some announcements later this year, and I think it'll be, it's like create a blockchain on demand essentially, and not be tied to one. It's like you never know if a blockchain is going to survive, even if it looks like a huge winner today.
Yeah.
And if you think that there's going to be if you think a blockchain is going to survive, decades to come, then like I think that is unwise. I think that perspective is one that's not founded on reality, and
there's not enough reality to.
And there's not exactly, and there's not enough reality to take from to
extrapolate into the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we can't expect all blockchains to live on forever. And so if we're building something as important as the internet, we need for it to be stable.
Yeah, you need to be agnostic to an extent, which I agree. And that's like one of the And if Bitcoin does stay around for decades and centuries, it's still completely applicable to Blockstack.
It's a great start,
right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, fascinating shit. Like like I was saying, like I went to like the first Blockstack meetup in New York when I first moved here from Chicago, and I've always just been really impressed by the way like Ryan and Manib approach it, and the way they handle themselves publicly, and blah 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 blah. Like I think they have like a good approach to how to build like a decentralized application ecosystem on top of Bitcoin in particular, and then if Bitcoin fails, other blockchains.
Yeah,
I don't think Bitcoin will fail, but I think all the better that you guys made it all agnostic in case it does.
Exactly.
Just,
I'm always questioning my assumptions. Like I don't see Bitcoin failing, but I leave room for being wrong.
You have to. You have to.
Absolutely.
If I got one knock on maximalists, it's that like
there's no reservation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's got to be. You got to leave that open. Like anything's possible. Anything could fucking happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will. But I acknowledge the possibility that it could, which is it's always stressful. It's always stressful in this space.
Why?
I don't know.
What are you stressed about? I feel zero stress.
Well.
Like as far as.
Well, you're actually building something. I'm just talking shit about the people building stuff, and that's where I get stressed out. It's like, all right, I'm just a mouthpiece. I'm just
What are you stressed about specifically?
Like, man, I'm misleading people. Like the people that read my newsletter, the people listening to this podcast. Like, I'm just afraid of misleading people, because I don't know all the answers, freaks. I don't. That's why I like to have conversations with people like you. To help me get a better understanding of everything. So that was that was a 420 heart to heart on Tales from the Crypt.
Wait, are you high? No, I'm just kidding.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'll save that for after the podcast.
The podcast that ends with an accusation of the other being high for the whole podcast.
If you want to roll a joint, we can do that right now before you go to this boxing match.
No, I don't think I can do that.
You don't want to imbibe?
I can't represent Blockstack in that way.
You're so professional.
Yeah.
I thought this was decentralized, though. It doesn't matter.
Well,
I'm kidding.
We're open to anything as long as you're not hurting anyone, right?
No. It's actually crazy. Chuck Schumer, representative from New York today, came out and said he wants to completely decriminalize marijuana at a federal level. Let's go, Chuck Schumer, announcing it on 422. Very savvy politician there. Very savvy.
Very smart. If he figures out how to abolish student loan debt or absolve, that he could become the next.
I don't think anybody has to do anything.
Yeah,
I think that's just like going to run its course. Like there's no way.
I know, but it is so painful for people coming out of college to pay $500 per month, $1,000 a month. It's
unsustainable.
I mean,
and it's going to get to a point where it's like, hey, let's take a step back here. Is this even wise as a macroeconomic policy to force the most productive demographic of the workforce to have to pay off this debt immediately as they join the workforce?
I mean, like doctors.
Oh, my buddies that went to Penn, I can't, like, my buddies that went to Ivy League schools, like, and, like, were true, like, blue collar, like, had to take out loans and pay for it themselves.
We punish people who are trying to make us healthy.
Right?
It's really nuts.
It's really fucked up.
Yeah.
God, do we want to jump into the corruption of the education system? What do you think?
Sure. Happy to.
What has enabled this is government grants, or the government sort of trying to coerce people to go to college.
I mean, the government moving slowly can be a feature or it can be a bug. And I think in the case of education, it has been a bug because in the sense that they've taken something that they perceive people as valuing deeply and have extended resources for people to get that thing for probably far too long, and I think
it's a goddamn racket.
And I also think the reality is like college education is not one size fit all, and I think like when you to look at the reality is usually dealt in numbers, right? Like, and if you look at university education student loan debt, it's gone up at 4x the rate of inflation since 1980. So I mean, obviously that's unsustainable, but it's also a hostage situation because, you have parents who feel like bad parents if they don't send their kids to college, and you have students who feel like Luddites are dumbasses if they don't go to college. And I think, well, it's tough because you end up with this like huge burden of debt afterwards. It's unabsolvable. That you can't wipe off your record.
It's going to come to a head at some point. Like it's just like a known fact that like the people taking out this debt are not going to attain positions that allow them to reach a salary that pays off that debt. Like especially like English art majors, stuff like that. Sorry if any of you guys are English art majors, but like it's a fact. Like the salaries that you're going to get.
I mean, so like coding boot camps, for example, they price the price of becoming a designer at like General Assembly at less of a cost than they do a full stack engineer that they're bringing to the course.
I went to a digital design boot camp.
We don't allow that in university because
I paid $2,000 for 16 weeks. 12 weeks, excuse me. Or 16. 4 were virtual and then 12 were in the classroom. $2,000, and I learned more in 3 months than I did at 4 years of college for something I wanted to learn about UX design.
I went to Johns Hopkins and I thought that education was shitty.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like I had like a renaissance period after graduating, and I was wondering why didn't I have that during college? And I think
I felt the same thing.
I think it was part of the fact that you're getting the best local professors. I mean, this is true to any school. You're getting the best people that are willing to be on premises, so that's scarce, right? Like the very best can't be everywhere, and I mean, like oh, and then yeah, I don't know why I was blanking on that. It must be the bourbon, and also you have you have it's like completely antithetical to what an autodidact would do, which is like you'd have
let's explain autodidact.
It's someone who teaches themselves. Someone who teaches themselves and is someone who's curious and teaches themselves and betters themselves and learns skills that are valuable and learns information that's valuable. Like when a university gives you 100 different majors, those majors don't actually map to the real world. Those majors map to ideology.
That's a great point.
And the problem is that ideology is it comes at a high cost, we'll just say. And so yeah.
Very ironic speaking to a Bitcoin maximalist.
Yeah.
It's a very ironic talking to a Bitcoin maximalist here.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm very ideological for some things. And I go back and forth. Is that like is that wise? Are there times
I actually was thinking about this exact thing yesterday. I was thinking about the Bitcoin maximalism. I really have a lot of respect for Bitcoin maximalists like Bitstein out there, Saifedean,
Michael Goldstein.
Yeah, Michael Goldstein, carnivore. Saifedean, carnivore. By the way, must be noted when you mention them.
Oh, and they'll laugh at you if you don't. You only meet.
Yeah, so they. I mean, like the Bitcoin maximalist thing. Like I was just kind of like thinking about this and. I was thinking like, and I tweeted yesterday, like, if you aren't constantly asking yourself, how do I know I'm right? Like, and really trying to find out the little nooks and crannies and where they might exist, because those nooks and crannies might be everything. And if you're wrong on that, then you've just made yourself into a useful idiot.
Yeah. Well, I will come to the defense of Michael and Saifedean here, and I think those are two people that have really, really, really thought about how they could be wrong. Saifedean just wrote a book about it, like the Bitcoin Standard. Go buy it on Amazon.
He wrote a book.
And
well, I would say like
basically
I didn't say they were incorrect. I didn't say I didn't respect them. I think
I was not assuming that you.
Oh yeah, well, you said come to the defense. I just wanted to cover my statement with have a lot of respect for those guys. Also, I have a lot of respect for Andrew DeSantis.
I love Andrew.
That guy.
He thinks different. He's got it tattooed on his wrist.
I know he does think different. He last thing I'll say, and I'll hop off. I've spent probably over 40 hours talking on the phone with Andrew DeSantis, and that dude is. There are very few people in the world like him.
Very few.
That dude is.
He's thinking on a completely different level.
That dude is very lucid, but not without imperfection. He's one of those guys that I think I was alluding to, the acting like a crazy person, like Kanye West. When you first look at him, or you first read his tweets, you're like, oh, this is a crazy person. But if you get the closer and closer you get to him, the more you realize he is very lucid.
I had the pleasure of meeting him in person this time last year.
He spent time at my house in San Francisco and in New York.
Boss, really?
I love that guy. He's shout out Andrew, if you're listening.
I doubt he's listening. If he may be.
Andrew might be listening. It's the end of the podcast. He goes through these whole things. Andrew, if you're listening, you've definitely had an indelible mark in my life, and I very much appreciate you.
I could say the same. I mean, I only had the pleasure of meeting Andrew once, and that was about this time last year. And the conversation we had at JG Mellon's on the Upper East Side was one of the most life-changing conversations I've ever had. And like you said, he's very cryptic in his tweets, but when you meet him in person and he describes what he's thinking, it's very lucid and it's very straightforward. And I walked out. I actually met him with Santiago, and we had a conversation. Santi and I walked out. Andrew hopped in a cab, and Santi and I were walking on Lexington or 3rd Ave on the Upper East Side, and we were just like, what the fuck just happened? That was the most insane conversation. We sat at a table for 3 hours, the three of us, hashed out a bunch of shit. I was so, mystified by the conversation we had just had. I got on the NQR to go back to Brooklyn, and I went 3 stops in the wrong direction. I went uptown for 3 stops and then realized, holy shit, I'm going the wrong way. I had to get off the subway, walk across the platform, and get on the train to go downtown, because I was just still thinking about the conversation we had, and it blew my mind. If you ask Santi about the religion we started, he'll say JG Mellon is our church.
Yeah, I always cite Andrew when I was finding people that were predicting the future with high accuracy. I was finding Andrew a lot, and so I spent a lot of time with him, and he really kind of gave me a different lens on reality. For that, I'm very thankful, and I would just say if you're willing to dive down the rabbit hole, you will find some things there that will change the way you look at the world, for sure.
Yeah. And if there's one thing we can glean from this conversation about Andrew in particular, is think different. Don't be afraid to think different. Don't be afraid to think about edge cases, to dive into topics that may be taboo, that may go against the grain of the mainstream. Yeah, this has been an incredible conversation, Patrick.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you coming through. We're going to have to do this again, because I only had you in here for an hour and 20 minutes. We have a lot more to talk about. Where can we find out more about you? Or actually, first, do you have a parting note for the freaks out there?
Yeah, sure. So if you liked what you heard about Blockstack and you think it's going to be the future, or you don't, still go to contribute.blockstack.org, and you can actually contribute to the Blockstack ecosystem and earn the native token of Blockstack. It's called Stacks. Also, check out blockstack.org. Some books you should definitely check out. Knowledge and Power by George Gilder, The Sovereign Individual. Follow Naval and Ravikant on Twitter, and follow Blockstack on Twitter.
And where can we follow you on Twitter?
I'm Patrick W. Stanley on Twitter, but I'm kind of a Blockstack shill, so you get what you follow.
You just named 2 books that are on the Tales from the Crypt book club list.
Oh yeah. Also, here's an Andrew DeSantis book that is meaty. It's hard to get through, but
GED.
Not Gödel Escherbach. It's The Bias of Communication. It was written in 1951 by Harold Innis. He's some Canadian dude. and it goes through kind of time and space bias communication, and is part of the reason I found Blockstack, and part of the reason I feel like those guys are at the finish line, and no one else realized it, but will.
Bang, bang. And let's end it there. If you like this podcast, please rate, subscribe, share, follow the newsletter, follow me on Twitter at Marty Bent. We'll be back next week. Peace and love.
Thanks, Marty.
Woo!
Sorry for
keeping you so long.
Yeah, my girlfriend.